Now we are going to discuss in detail of Diencephalon, the part of Forbrain. As you know that when the CNS is developing, first of all there is a formation of neural tube. So let's draw the neural tube here. The cranial end of neural tube develops three swellings: upper, middle and lower. And sacral end forms the spinal cord. So as the CNS is developing in intrauterine life in baby or fetus, these three swellings further develops. The first one swelling further develops into two parts. The outer and larger part known as Diencephalon and the lower and inner part known as Diencephalon, and these two collectively known as Forbrain. And the middle one swelling remains as a single entity that is known as midbrain, and the other name of midbrain is mesencephalon. And the third swelling further develops into two parts, and the name for this swelling is hindbrain, that is also known as rhombencephalon. And the sacral end of this neural tube forms the spinal cord. Right? Now let's go into detail of Diencephalon. First of all, we will discuss what are the structures derived from Diencephalon. So you should have a very clear concept that what are the structures and which are the parts of Diencephalon, and what are the structures that are derived from Diencephalon. Number 1 is thalamus. Thalamus is the largest part of Diencephalon. Second structure that is derived from Diencephalon is hypothalamus, and third one is subthalamus. Let's go into detail of Diencephalon. First of all, we will discuss what are the structures derived from Diencephalon. Right? You should have a very clear concept what are the structures which are part of the Diencephalon, or what are the structures that are derived from Diencephalon. The first structure that derived from the Diencephalon is thalamus. Thalamus is the largest part of Diencephalon. And the second structure that is derived from Diencephalon is hypothalamus. And the third one is subthalamus. And there are some more structures also, so let me draw them here. Okay. And there are some more structures that are related to the Diencephalon. So let's get started with the third ventricle. Third ventricle lies above the midbrain. As the third ventricle moves down, it forms a narrow duct called cerebral aqueduct at the level of midbrain. As the cerebral aqueduct moves downward, it expanded into a cavity called as fourth ventricle, and fourth ventricle lies at the level of cerebellum. On each side of the third ventricle, there are masses of grey matter that are known as thalami, right thalamus and left thalamus. So on the back of the third ventricle, there is a median swelling, and this median swelling is called as pineal gland or pineal body. Okay, let me repeat it. On the side of third ventricle, there are thalami, right thalamus and left thalamus. On the back side, there is pineal gland or pineal body. The floor of third ventricle lies on the midbrain, and on the posterior top of the third ventricle, there are two small masses of grey matter called habenular nuclei, and the white matter connecting these nuclei called habenular commissure. And these three structures, two habenular nuclei and one pineal gland called as epithalamus. Now there is a question, what is the location of hypothalamus? As we already discussed the structures related to diencephalon like thalamus, location of third ventricle, fourth ventricle, and epithalamus, and other structures related to diencephalon. Now we will discuss in detail of hypothalamus here. So this is the left thalamus, this is the right thalamus. So what is the structure that is extending in between these two thalami? The structure that is extending in between these two thalami is called third ventricle. Now on the anterior part of third ventricle, there is another extrusion that covers the third ventricle anteriorly, right and left side and below, and this extrusion is called hypothalamus. And if you come back on the third ventricle, there is a central swelling called pineal gland. The floor of third ventricle is on the midbrain, and right and left side are covered by two thalami, and anteriorly there is hypothalamus. As the floor of third ventricle is on the midbrain, so this below the midbrain there is pons. Below the pons there is medulla oblongata, and then there is spinal cord. And at the back side of midbrain there are four colliculi, which are appeared here as green color masses in the picture. Let's come on to hypothalamus. Hypothalamus has a downward swelling that is called pituitary gland, and this pituitary gland is further divided into two parts, anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary. Behind this pituitary gland, on the downward side of the hypothalamus, there are two mammillary bodies. So this was all about the location of hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and two mammillary bodies, right? Now we are going to review all the structures of diencephalon. This is the left thalamus, this is the right thalamus, and the structure extending in between these two thalami is the third ventricle. And these two thalami also have masses of gray matter called medial and lateral geniculate bodies. So in front of the hypothalamus, the optic tract divides into optic nerves, and this optic nerve going to geniculate body on each side. Optic tract of right and left side bridged up by gray matter, and this gray matter is all hypothalamus. Okay, just in front of hypothalamus there is optic chiasma. On sides of hypothalamus there are optic tracts, and under it is having swellings like pituitary gland and two mammillary bodies. And posteriorly hypothalamus is connected with the thalamus. Right side of the hypothalamus is connected with the right thalamus, and left side of hypothalamus is connected with the left thalamus, and under surface of hypothalamus is connected with the midbrain. So actually diencephalon are the structures which are present around the third ventricle. So third ventricle is the cavity of diencephalon. Even optic nerves are derivatives of diencephalon. Optic nerves are not true peripheral nerves. These are part of the central nervous system. Suppose you are having eyeballs. Below the third ventricle, there is midbrain, then comes pons, then medulla oblongata, and finally spinal cord. And at the level of midbrain, on the posterior side of midbrain, there are 4 masses of grey matter called as colliculi. There are 2 superior colliculi and 2 inferior colliculi. Now I'll sum up all the information of diencephalon. Diencephalon includes structures like thalamus, epithalamus, hypothalamus, and other related structures around the third ventricle. And here we will discuss only the main structures of diencephalon. Let's come to thalami. These are the largest part of diencephalon and include right and left thalamus that lies right and left of third ventricle. Then comes to epithalamus. Epithalamus includes 2 habenular nuclei and 1 pineal gland. These 2 structures collectively known as epithalamus. And the third structure of diencephalon is hypothalamus that lies anterior to the third ventricle and include 2 major components. Number 1 is pituitary gland that further divided into anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary. And second structure of hypothalamus is 2 mammillary bodies. These 3 structures are the important components of hypothalamus. So this was all about the diencephalon, and we will discuss each structure of diencephalon in detail in our coming videos.